According to Stafford Brown et al., thermoregulation is the process of maintaining a constant core temperature. In humans, this temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. The skin temperature of the body can vary a great deal. If the temperature is increased or decreased by 1 degree Celsius or more, this will affect an athlete's physical and mental performance. When exercising, the body heats up and excess heat is expelled out of the body through sweating and vasodilation. The blood flows closer to the skin surface, cooling both the skin and the blood. Tidal volume. Tidal volume is the amount of air breath. This will increase in relation to the amount of exercise you do, due to the body needing to expel carbon dioxide to allow more oxygen into the body to supply to the working muscles. During exercise, the body's production of carbon dioxide goes up. Therefore, the lungs expand to allow more carbon dioxide to be expelled. When Mo Farah begins exercise, his body will require more oxygen for respiration in the working muscles and will need to remove more carbon dioxide so the depth of his breathing can increase. As Mo Farah is an elite and experienced athlete, he can increase his tidal volume instead of his breathing rate, allowing him to run for longer lengths of time as he is getting more oxygen to the working muscles through his breaths. Aerobic system. This energy system is similar to the anaerobic glycolytic energy system, a lactic energy system, but because of the presence of oxygen, pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid at a much slower rate. This system also starts with glycogen being converted into glucose. Glucose is then broken down by phosphorofructokinase to make pyruvic acid and energy, creating 2 moles of phosphate. Instead of conversion to lactic acid, this process takes place for 3+ minutes. An advantage of this is that it allows us to work for long periods of time. The disadvantage of this energy system is that it takes a long time to start. For example, when starting a jog in the first few seconds, you will feel tired, but after enough time our body adjusts and moves into this energy system. Muscle spindles. Muscle spindle is an organ placed within the muscle and communicates to the central nervous system, or CNS. The purpose of this is for when the muscle is in a state of contraction, the muscle contracts and changes the tension on the muscle spindle, which is related to the CNS, and the CNS can deal with the information by either increasing the contraction or relaxing the muscle. When the muscle lengthens, a spindle is pulled, and when the muscle contracts, the spindle goes back to its former position, stopping the muscle from overstretching, known as stretch reflex. Golgi tendon organ. The Golgi tendon organ, or the GTO, is a proprioceptor receptor organ which can be found at the origins and insertions of muscles. Its purpose is to cause relaxation by interrupting the contraction, and works as a counter for the muscle spindles. They send a message to the brain through the junctions as soon as they sense an overload in the muscles. An example of the GTO working is during a stretch. If you hold a static stretch for more than 7 seconds, the GTO stops the increase in muscle tension. When activated during stretching, muscle spindle activity inside the muscle being stretched is stopped, meaning a deeper stretch can be achieved. The GTOs and muscle spindles work together through their reflective actions to prevent injury. This is also why static stretching is recommended for 15 or more seconds. Oxygen dissociation curve. According to Stafford Brown et al. 2007, oxygen is released by the hemoglobin in places where there is little oxygen, such as in exercising muscles. The oxygen dissociation curve represents the ease with which hemoglobin releases oxygen when it is exposed to tissues of different concentrations of oxygen. The hemoglobin has a high affinity for oxygen, therefore the start of the curve begins with a steep rise, meaning a small rise in partial pressure, which will lead to oxygen and hemoglobin binding easily. Changes in blood carbon dioxide level and levels of acidity causes shifts in the oxygen dissociation curve. These shifts enhance oxygen release in tissue and increase oxygen uptake in the lungs, known as the Bohr effect. This happens during exercise as there is a higher production of carbon dioxide in the blood. During exercise, increased production of carbon dioxide, increased temperature, and higher levels of acidity in the blood will cause the curve to shift to the right. And after exercise, when carbon dioxide levels decrease, temperatures lowers and pH levels rise again due to the loss of carbon dioxide, the curve will move back to the left. A hypothetical explanation of what will happen when trying to solve the problem presented. A null hypothesis states that there is no significance between two variables. A two-tailed hypothesis states that something will happen to one side and something will happen to the other. For example, it will land on heads 9 times and tails 11 times. A one-tailed hypothesis is a normal statement of what you believe will happen. For example, the coin will land on heads. Method. Before beginning, we measure the client's blood pressure, blood lactate, breathing rate, resting height, and O2 saturation prior to the exercise. The exercise involved the client working on a bike at 60 to 80% of their maximal heart rate for 20 minutes without rest. Throughout the test, we measured the client's heart rate, O2 saturation, blood pressure, and breathing rate every 2 minutes, allowing for comparisons to client data in comparison to the hypothesis and observation of how the different systems were working during steady-state exercise. Moreover, we measured their blood lactate and rate of perceived exertion every 4 minutes. Finally, we measured all the client's previous mentioned data, post 1 and post 2 minutes. Hypothesis. Our hypothesis stated heart rate will initially increase in comparison to rest and will plateau at around 3 to 4 minutes until 80 minutes and will rapidly decrease post-exercise due to the presence of oxygen. During steady-state exercise, there will be a low amount of lactic acid, and we can measure this using the blood lactate monitor and oximeter. Breathing rate. My hypothesis stated that the breathing rate would initially increase as there is a higher demand for oxygen until 3 to 5 minutes, where steady state will have been reached and breathing rate will have started to plateau. Throughout steady state exercise, ATP will be first used to start off and then move into the aerobic glycolysis energy system, because the client was exercising at a moderate intensity for a long period of time and would therefore need oxygen to supply to the working muscles. Energy system analysis. I hypothesized that the client would use the ATP system to start off with and then move into the aerobic glycolysis energy system, because the client was exercising at a moderate intensity for a long period of time and therefore need oxygen to supply to the working muscles. The methods used were recording blood lactate every 6 minutes and O2 saturation every 4 minutes. Normative data show that O2 saturation levels will decrease slightly as the client is working aerobically, but still for a long period of time. Summer and Josh's O2 saturation data showed a clear plateau, whereas Max's data showed an anomaly because of how low his O2 saturation was. This may be because he was not constantly working at the same pace, and therefore his results fluctuate just as his intensity did, or may have. The lactate levels of the client showed that there was an increase until 2 minutes where there is a plateau. Both Max and Summer had high lactate levels, showing that they were working using the ATP energy system at first, and slowly changed it to the aerobic glycolysis system, supporting my hypothesis. My hypothesis stated that the breathing rate would initially increase as there is a high demand for oxygen, until 3 to 5 minutes where steady state will have been reached and breathing rate will have started to plateau. When heart rate increases, breathing rate also increases, and towards the end when exercise is finished, breathing rate will drop sharply. The way that this was recorded was by watching how many breaths through the nose or mouth the participant had taken per minute and recording it. Because of this, there was a high chance of human error, but the data seems to be similar. Looking at normative data, we can see that when an athlete or anybody starts exercising, their breathing rate will increase. This is also shown in the graph. We can see that there's a steady increase until the client reaches steady state, where it slightly starts to decrease as the demand for oxygen has been met. The graph also shows that post-exercise there is a decrease in breathing rate. Both Josh and Summers' data show a slight increase at the beginning, and after starts to plateau at 4 minutes. It then shows a slight decrease at about 20 minutes, which is due to the exercise having stopped and no longer having to work at a higher intensity. Max's results are an anomaly, as there was a noted problem with the technology, meaning the data was slightly off. Cardiovascular system analysis. We hypothesized that during steady-state exercise, heart rate will initially increase in comparison to rest and will plateau at around 3 to 4 minutes until 18 minutes, and will rapidly decrease post-exercise due to the presence of oxygen. There were 3 different devices that could be used to measure the heart rate: the oximeter, heart rate monitor and watch, and blood pressure monitor. The main one used was the heart rate monitor and watch, although the other 2 were helpful if there was an anomaly or error. Heart rate readings were taken every 2 minutes as a way of measuring whether the athlete was working submaximally. The normative data for heart rate during steady-state exercise suggests that during the first 4 minutes there will be a steady incline of heart rate, but from then on it should plateau for the remainder of the exercise, until 20 minutes, where it would drop. For the initial stage of steady-state exercise, both Max and Summers' data mirror the normative data. However, Josh's data shows an initial decrease in heart rate due to the fact that his resting heart rate before the test was measured at 105 beats per minute. Having a resting heart rate of 105 beats per minute is extremely high. It is not Josh's normal heart rate, and we did not believe the reason to be because of an anticipatory rise. With 3 different ways of recording his heart rate, they all showed his heart rate to be near the same. Therefore, I believe the warm-up which was completed at too high of an intensity, which was also shown as his heart rate decreased when starting steady-state exercise, due to it being at a lower intensity than his warm-up. Only Summers' heart rate shows a clear plateau. Both Max and Josh's data showed inconsistencies. There were parts where it would decrease, increase, and plateau, but not as shown by the normative data. If we analyse Max's after his first 4 minutes, instead of a clear plateau, there is a significant increase in heart rate from 108 to 186 in 4 to 6 minutes of exercise, which then remains this way for 4 minutes. There are 2 occurrences that may have happened here. Either Max is working too hard, or the data is being recorded incorrectly. This caused his heart rate to be sitting above his submaximal training zone. I believe the reason to be that Max was working too hard, as he recorded his RPE as a 16, which is too high for steady-state exercise, and instead should expect to see around 10 to 12, as once steady state is reached, the exercise is much more easy. At 11 minutes, Max was told to stop working at this intensity, which is shown as his heart rate decreases down to 170 beats per minute, which is in his submaximal training zone, and then plateaus for the remaining 9 minutes of exercise. Only Summers' data follows the normative data completely, although we do see an anticipatory rise in heart rate at the start because of noradrenaline being released, and later plateaus while working in her submaximal training zone. At the end of exercise, we can see a slight decrease due to the heart rate returning to the resting heart rate, supporting the hypothesis. When looking at the graph, we can see Max and Summers had an increase at the beginning of the exercise, but starts to plateau as their bodies meet the demand of the sport, whereas Josh has a decrease in heart rate at the first stage and then increases during the exercise due to his warm-up being too intense.